That's Nick.
And that's Joseph, and today we're here to talk about Summer of Sam, the 1999 Spike Lee joint, which was released on Blu-ray courtesy of Kino Lorber on February 1st, 2020. I think it's also worth noting that Kino Lorber put out a handful of new, older Spike Lee's catalogs on Blu-ray, several for the first time, including Crooklyn, Clockers, Jungle Fever, something else I'm forgetting, but yeah.
Okay. So, Summer of Sam.
Summer of Sam, SOS.
Is recalling the story of a group of people during the summer of...
A group of Italian Americans, specifically, who all live in the same neighborhood in the Bronx during the infamous Summer of Sam in 1977 New York.
Okay.
Which was one of the hottest summers on record, and David Berkowitz was on a very infamous killing spree.
David Berkowitz as a serial killer, is like a fascinating case.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not difficult to make that subject interesting. It makes sense to me why it would be used as a backdrop for a story. But in this case, the story is not very well done.
I remember renting this on VHS with my parents when it came out, and I remember both of them really disliking it, with my mother having very choice things to say.
Well, it's very adult, so I can appreciate a mom not liking it.
So originally it was supposed to have an NC-17 rating because of the orgy scene at
the Pleasure...
Plato's
Closet.
Plato's Return, yeah.
Whatever.
Plato's Closet. But where they have the orgy scene, and apparently there were a lot more explicit shots that were edited out.
Sure.
But the film premiered at the Directors Fortnight in Cannes, and I think it's gone on to become, it's considered one of Spike Lee's most contentious, controversial films, as in love it or hate it.
Well, let's quickly try to break it down. So it stars a lot of really great people.
Yes.
John Leguizamo.
Adrien Brody.
Mira Sorvino.
Jennifer Esposito. Ben Gazzara, Patti LuPone, Bebe Neuwirth.
Spike Lee and his sister are in it.
Yes, Roger Guenveur Smith, Anthony LaPaglia, Michael Imperioli, and then of course Michael Badalucco.
A lot of great people.
Yeah.
The story is convoluted.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I think generally plots like this, where they're like intersecting sort of plot lines, generally the people who connect aren't so closely configured. But in this film, it's like these people are all in the same neighborhood. They all interact, it seems like, on a regular basis. Like, they all know each other. So the fact that, like, the way the story's told, their situations are intersecting, it seems kind of like, well, yeah, because they all live in the same neighborhood and do the same shit. So it seemed really complicated for no reason. But I don't even know where to begin. I guess John Leguizamo's character is married to Mira Sorvino.
The focus is really Vinny and Ritchie, so they're friends, John Leguizamo and Adrien Brody, and how they and the various people related to them. Because what's his name? Ritchie, Adrien Brody, has gone off and has returned to the neighborhood, and he's gone punk. Because the film is also the subplot, the subtext is about disco versus punk.
Okay, but let's just try to explain the story. So, John Leguizamo's married to Mira Sorvino. Mm-hmm. They seem to have a loving but sexless relationship. Mm-hmm. There are several scenes of them going to clubs, dancing, having a good time, and then initially while they're at the club, while he leaves his wife at the club, he takes her cousin home and has sex with her. So cheats on his wife right away. And he's having sex with her in the car. He later finds out that on that night, in that same block, David Berkowitz killed a couple. Mm. So when he finds that out, he becomes paranoid. But prior to that, he cheats on Mira, I think twice, before she finds out and confronts him. Mm-hmm. Then Adrien Brody, like you said, he leaves the town or the neighborhood, comes back, and now he has a British accent, he's punk. We find out he's performing at a gay male theater / strip club.
Male World.
Mm-hmm. Which is obviously problematic for all of the homophobic people, all the guys in the neighborhood. They also, as the killings continue, these neighborhood guys think Adrien Brody is the son of Sam.
They set up a kind of neighborhood watch, and they decide amongst themselves that he must be the one.
So this is a big portion of the film, but it's very it isn't very well developed. Mm-hmm. It's just like we kind of have a few scenes of them kind of riding around and confronting people until they ultimately decide that it is Adrien Brody's character, and they convince John Leguizamo's character to entrap him so they can beat him up and take him to the police, because that would make sense. Mm-hmm. I would say that's the main story, right? Yeah. There are a lot of sub things, Adrien Brody's mom, played by Patti LuPone, in a very interesting role that she does the most with. Mm-hmm. She's in a relationship and
with Mike Starr, who's very kind of bargain basement Danny Aiello.
Yes. But they do the best with what they have, so there's that. They have a relationship. He's still trying to live at home, but he's disruptive because who wants their adult-ass, punk-ass kid in the house? Spike Lee has a role as a news reporter, mm-hmm. which I think is probably the worst part of the film.
The two worst parts of the film are Spike Lee's own performance and the son of Sam.
Okay, well that's the worst. So, but first I think so. There really that's pretty much the story. Spike Lee is throughout playing a news reporter, kind of reporting on the killings, and also kind of giving the black perspective, which is not very well...
Briefly.
Very brief mm-hmm. and not satisfying.
Which would have been a more interesting perspective.
Well, yes, so we want to talk about that more. But I think the most laughable part of the film are the scenes involving David Berkowitz.
Yes. Going crazy, listening to the dog barking. Harvey the dog.
So the famous scene from this film is the dog talking.
Which is voiced by John Turturro.
Oh, didn't know that. Mm-hmm. So obviously the CGI is not perfect. Mm-hmm. It was a choice that was made to see the dog talk, and it's laughable. Mm-hmm. Aside from that, every scene with David Berkowitz is shot in a sepia-like tone. Not sepia, but just this filter that makes it look sort of jaundiced, and it just took me out every time. Then the actor playing Berkowitz, whenever he kills someone and flees, he has this weird scurry that may have actually mimicked how David Berkowitz walked, but in the context of this film that's kind of a mess, it was laughable. Mm-hmm. It was laughable.
Yeah, there's a lot of elements in this film that take you out of it, including the changing aspect ratios with certain things. In the scene where they use the Who's Baba O'Reilly with Adrien Brody, they change the aspect ratio, kind of as I said while we were watching it, what he does in Crooklyn, the best scene in Crooklyn, when the little girl goes down south to visit Aunt Song. But which it just a very ugly aesthetic.
It's not appealing. I mean, yeah, it's not. It isn't appealing. Every scene is a different shot. I feel like every shot is a different shot.
It's shot by Ellen Kuras, who did He Got Game for Spike Lee, and as Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So I think these are choices that are you can
deliberate
to Spike Lee.
Sure. It felt like if a person were told you can do whatever you want. You can just do whatever you want, and you can do all the ideas you ever had. That's how this film feels.
I mean, late 90s Spike Lee, this came in between He Got Game and Bamboozled, which I consider both to be superior films, especially Bamboozled. But
I think Spike Lee is a talented filmmaker with with a very strong perspective, and I think his voice should be heard. I think it's clear with, I'll say good reason, he has sort of a disdain for Italian American people.
I think so. And what I was saying, I think he has a fascination with Italian Americans, but doesn't like them.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like.
And as a black man growing up in that area during that time, it would make sense that he sort of has this unique perspective that I think is true for him, but it blinds him from telling a story. I think so in Do the Right Thing, it's so effective because it's we get dual perspectives with equal time. Mm-hmm. So it feels fair and it's strong. But in this film, it's just it's like these people are in a fishbowl or watching them, and it's just told, and like the dialogue is not good.
There's no care for any of them.
No.
And it, to me, like, and I was saying this while we were watching it too, it feels very much like a companion film to Do the Right Thing in its build up to this blow up mob scene.
Yes.
And dueling cultural shifts that are happening.
So the last thing I'll say is what we talked about when it was over is I think what would have been a superior film and something that Spike Lee could have done well is told this story through because there is a little moment in the film when Spike Lee is portraying this reporter where there's a woman like that he's interviewing saying that it's so wonderful that this white man is out here killing these white people. And I thought, wouldn't it be such a great film if the Summer of Sam was the backdrop, and it's told from the perspective of these like disenfranchised, poorly treated people who are not the victims for once, and maybe sort of a morbid, like maybe there's some black person who's out there mimicking the killings because no one's going to suspect them. Something much more intriguing,
or nobody's even
provocative, or there's so many things that he could have done that would have been so much more.
This to me felt like he's almost trying to do Scorsese, but maybe it's just this community feels that way.
I don't think he understands, like having the John Leguizamo's character plays a hairstylist. I think that characterization was not told well. Adrien Brody being a gay man.
Yes, the gay scenes about
Spike Lee didn't seem to know how to write that in a way that felt like authentic.
And this was co-written by Michael Imperioli and Victor Colicchio.
This is why Woody Allen doesn't have a lot of black characters, because he knows he can't write these
or
people.
Gay characters.
Or gay. So I feel like he stays in his lane. Spike Lee maybe needs to stay in his lane. I mean, this obviously is an old film, but I think this is an example of someone who just didn't know how to write these types of characters.
Well, and at this time too, this was a way that this was provocative, and there was nobody, there was no cultural critic sounding the alarm that this reads false.
Sure.
Like Adrien Brody in his string bean body with in a porno theater with like dolls that are made out of sheets. With Grace Jones playing in the background. I don't know. It's just not.
Also,
sexy.
the plot line a major plot line is the neighborhood people sort of building up to assuming that Adrien Brody's
to a lynching.
To a lynching. Mm-hmm. But it's like, okay, so obviously we know that he's not the killer, and I think it would have been so much more interesting if that would have been more like him being considered the killer would have been more developed, because we all know he's not. So
and we don't need to see the Son of Sam at all.
No, so it just felt so like.
Roger Ebert highly praised the film, and I wrote down that he wrote it's about the fever to find someone to blame who is different. But I don't think that the film is even really doing that, because this is a personal vendetta for these people with Adrien Brody's character, because they have the other homosexual played by Brian Tarantina, the flamboyant one, who they protect. So this film is not operating on that base level of like mob rule, kill Frankenstein.
Kill the different. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point too. I'm sad to say that I didn't like this film, because I do think Spike Lee is a very important filmmaker and has done some things I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, I agree.
But I would give this film 1.5 out of 5 stars.
I agree. It's worthy of a 1.5. There are many interesting things about it. Like that's actually CBGB that he filmed in.
Okay.
Jimmy Breslin, who opens and closes the film with that old man, that's the actual reporter that Son of Sam was writing to. I had brought up that a movie that just opened, it premiered at Sundance last year, but with Naomi Watts, called The Wolf Hour. Where she plays this agoraphobic counterculture writer who's locked up in her apartment, set during the exact same summer, but does a really good job, and during the blackouts and the heat, about a woman who won't go outside and engage, but this man is killing people. To me, used David Berkowitz as a much more interesting phantom backdrop than this ever could.
Sure.
But
anything else?
No, but I give the film 1.5 out of 5. Kino Lorber's Blu-ray release 3 out of 5.
All right, bye.
Bye.